Story 1. The Guest Who Watches. I never thought I'd feel so unsettled in my own home. My name is Elena Carter. I'm 28, and I work as a freelance illustrator. After moving out of the city, I rented a small cabin on the edge of Lake Vermilion, hoping the quiet would help me focus on my work. The cabin was quaint, 2 stories, rustic wooden beams, a fireplace, but the seclusion was part of its charm. I often spent evenings sketching by the window, listening to the gentle lap of the water. Life there was peaceful, until the first odd night. I was sitting at my desk, finishing a series of sketches, when I heard a soft thump from upstairs. At first, I dismissed it. Cabin sounds, probably the floorboards settling. But then, I heard it again. My heart skipped a beat. The room above was supposed to be my storage loft, untouched since I moved in. Hesitating, I grabbed my flashlight and climbed the narrow staircase. The loft was empty, boxes untouched, my old sketchbooks stacked neatly. My stomach twisted in confusion. That night, I barely slept. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward me. When I finally drifted off, I awoke to the sound of soft footsteps above me. I froze, straining to listen. They weren't loud, just deliberate. The loft. I knew it. My first instinct was to call the police. But what would I say? Someone might be sneaking around my empty storage loft. Ridiculous. The next day, I tried to shake it off. I told myself I was imagining things, stressed from deadlines and too much coffee. But the unease didn't fade. Objects in the kitchen began shifting. A mug on the counter would appear a few inches from where I left it. My sketchbooks, once stacked neatly, sometimes lay open on the floor. It could be nothing, but my gut screamed otherwise. One evening, I returned from a walk along the lake to find the front door slightly ajar. I lock it every night. I double-checked the locks. They hadn't been tampered with. I called my friend Marcus, who lived in town, and explained the situation. He tried to reassure me, suggesting animals or the wind, but I couldn't believe it. This felt deliberate. Someone had been in my home. The nights grew worse. I stopped sleeping. Every creak of the floor, every whisper of wind through the trees sent adrenaline surging. I installed cameras around the cabin, hoping to catch an intruder. At first, nothing. Then one night, the footage showed her, a woman, standing at the edge of the loft staircase, completely still, just staring. Her features were indistinct in the grainy infrared light, but her posture made my blood run cold. I had never seen her before, yet she appeared intent on watching me, as though she had been there all along. I confronted the loft that night. Flashlight in hand, heart hammering, I called out, "Who's there?" Silence. I moved forward, every step measured. The loft was empty. Again. My flashlight beam swept across the floorboards, walls, and boxes. Nothing. Days passed, and the presence lingered. Shadows danced in corners where no light should fall. My sketches began showing figures I hadn't drawn, silhouettes that weren't mine. And always, that sensation, eyes on me, even when I was alone. One evening, I sat by the fireplace, hoping the warm glow would calm me. Then I saw her again, standing outside the window, half hidden by the trees. I froze, too afraid to move. Her face was obscured, but the intent in her stance was unmistakable. I grabbed my phone to call Marcus, but before I could dial, she vanished into the darkness. The following week, I decided to face it. I set a trap, a flashlight in the loft, motion sensors, and a small recording device. That night, I waited in the living room, my sketchpad trembling in my lap. Hours passed. Just when I thought nothing would happen, I heard the soft, deliberate steps again. I grabbed my flashlight and ran upstairs. The loft was empty. But then the flashlight caught a glimpse of something that made me stop cold. A single, tiny footprint in the dust, not mine, leading to the far corner. I backed away slowly. I've learned to live with it now, or at least tolerate it. Every day, I check the locks, monitor the cameras, and avoid the loft when possible. I haven't seen her face clearly, and I hope I never do. But sometimes, late at night, I'll catch a shadow in the corner of my eye, or a faint creak from above. And I know she's watching, always watching. Bosley, I don't have a dog. Just me and the relentless feeling that I am never truly alone. Story 2. The car that waited for me. I work as a night shift security guard for a mid-sized museum in Hartford, Connecticut. The job isn't glamorous, but it pays my rent and keeps me away from the noise of the day. My hours are strange, though. By the time I clock out, it's usually close to 2 a.m., when the city feels less like a place where people live and more like a stage set after the actors have gone home. Driving home at that hour became routine, a hollow silence, interrupted only by the hum of traffic lights changing for no one. Still, I had a habit of making one last stop before heading back to my apartment. A 24-hour laundromat on the corner of Maple and Ash. It wasn't that I needed laundry done every night. It was more about the vending machine in the back that sold cans of iced coffee colder than anything you'd get at a convenience store. That bitter metallic taste became my crutch, the thing that kept me from falling asleep at the wheel. That night I pulled in as usual. The place was nearly empty, except for a single minivan parked way in the corner of the lot. The blinds inside the laundromat were half drawn, and the only sound was the hum of dryers. Nothing strange about that, except the minivan's engine was still running, headlights off, windows too tinted to see inside. I caught myself staring, then shook it off. Maybe some exhausted parent was waiting while their kid finished the laundry. I grabbed my drink, walked back out, and found myself glancing again at the van. The engine sound hadn't changed. Steady and low. Something about it gnawed at me. Instead of heading home, I took the long way around the city, telling myself I wanted to enjoy the quiet. Hartford's riverfront has a walking path that curls under the highway and ends at an overlook with a perfect view of the water. I hadn't been there in months, but that night it felt like the right place to sit for a while. When I pulled into the tiny gravel lot by the overlook, I froze. The minivan was already there. Same dull vibration of the engine. Same two dark windows. My stomach dropped. I was certain I hadn't been followed. I had taken side streets, cut through downtown, even paused at a closed gas station to throw them off, if anyone was behind me. But there it was, waiting like it had always been. I sat in my car with the ignition off, staring at the van through my rearview mirror. My hands were sweating against the steering wheel. The lot was otherwise empty, just the river and the whisper of traffic from the bridge above. Minutes dragged. Finally, I forced myself to breathe, grabbed my phone, and called an old friend, Tessa, who lived nearby. She worked late shifts at a diner and was still awake. I asked, half joking, if she wanted to meet me at the overlook for a late coffee. She agreed, though she could tell something was off in my voice. While I waited, I kept my eyes on the van. It never moved. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe I just wanted it to be the same one, because the thought of it following me was worse than coincidence. When Tessa's beat-up Subaru finally rolled in, relief washed over me. She hopped out, waving a thermos like a peace offering. I stepped out too, laughing nervously as I explained my weird hunch about the van. She raised an eyebrow and glanced over. "That thing," she said, "looks abandoned." Except the exhaust was still curling out of the tailpipe. We walked the short path to the overlook. sitting on the cold stone ledge where the city lights shimmered on the black water. For a few minutes, it felt normal again. We talked, shared sips of her coffee, pretended the world was smaller than it really was. But then came the sound. Doors creaking open, one after another, from behind us. 4 in total. I turned, heart hammering. Shapes stepped out of the van. They didn't speak, didn't look at each other. They just stood there, like they were waiting for us to notice. Tessa stiffened beside me. "This is messed up," she whispered. We tried to play it cool, walking back toward the lot at a steady pace. But with each step, the figures seemed to mirror us, keeping equal distance. Not following directly, just adjusting, like pieces in some silent choreography. When we reached her car, Tessa fumbled with her keys. I glanced at my own vehicle a few feet away. For a split second, I thought about making a run for it. But then I saw it. One of the figures already standing next to my driver's side door. Still, silent, waiting. I shoved Tessa into her car instead. We walked the doors, breath fogging up the windshield. The figures hadn't advanced. They only spread out across the lot, like they were closing invisible exits. "Start it. Just drive," I muttered. She did. Headlights flared, and in that sudden wash of light, I finally saw their faces. Or rather, didn't. Every one of them wore identical blank masks, smooth, pale, with no eye holes I could see. The van's engine roared back to life. Tessa floored it, gravel spitting out under the tires. In the rear view, I watched the van swing around, headlights flaring, following close behind. We didn't head to my place. We didn't head to hers. Instead, we drove in looping patterns through the city, hoping to lose them. And eventually, we did. Or at least, the headlights disappeared somewhere along the highway. But I haven't gone back to the laundromat since. And last night, parked across the street from my apartment, I swear I saw that same minivan again. Engine running, headlights off, just waiting. Story 3. The Library That Watched Us. I grew up in a small coastal town in Maine, the kind of place where the biggest excitement was the annual lobster festival and everyone knew everyone else. After high school, most of my friends either left for college or got stuck working at the docks. I was one of the few who stayed, and boredom had a way of pushing us towards strange adventures. There was an abandoned library on the edge of town, right next to the old cemetery. It had been closed for nearly 20 years after a storm damaged its roof, and no one bothered to restore it. The locals avoided it, muttering about bad luck. But for us, it was a magnet. A perfect spot to hang out, scare ourselves, and feel like we were part of something mysterious. One autumn evening, 4 of us decided to sneak in. There was me, Sarah, my best friend since grade school, always practical but curious. Evan, the joker of our group who couldn't stay quiet for 5 minutes. And Claire, the quiet one who always seemed to notice details the rest of us missed. We weren't drunk, we weren't high, we just wanted a story to tell. The front doors were chained, so we slipped around to the side where a broken basement window gave us an entry. The air inside was stale, heavy with dust, and the faint smell of damp paper. Our flashlights cut across rows of warped shelves, toppled chairs, and piles of books swollen with mildew. Every sound we made seemed louder than it should have been. The crunch of glass under our sneakers, the echo of our laughter bouncing back at us. The library basement had several rooms. We settled in the largest one, a reading hall with collapsed tables and a massive fireplace blackened with soot. Evan joked about holding a seance, which Sarah quickly shot down, but we stayed anyway, shining our lights around and picking through the mess. At first, it was just funny. Someone had carved names into the walls. A few chairs were stacked strangely in a corner. The usual creepy but harmless stuff. Then we heard it. The sound of a page turning. Crisp, deliberate, like someone flipping through a book. We all froze. My first thought was that it was just the wind stirring a loose sheet of paper. But when we followed the sound, there was nothing on the floor. Just empty shelves. Maybe a rat, Evan said, trying to sound casual. But even he kept glancing over his shoulder. We tried to brush it off, but the atmosphere shifted. The silence pressed harder, and the beam of my flashlight felt too narrow, like it wasn't reaching far enough into the shadows. That's when Claire noticed something. The mirror. It was a tall, freestanding mirror shoved into a corner, its surface dusty and cracked. None of us remembered seeing it when we came in, but there it stood, angled so it reflected the room in strange, broken fragments. Claire whispered that it gave her a bad feeling, and I couldn't blame her. Something about it was wrong. The glass seemed too dark, like it wasn't reflecting light properly. Sarah suggested we leave, but Evan, of course, walked right up to it. He grinned at his own reflection, tapped the glass, and said, "Boo." Nothing happened. We all laughed nervously. But as he stepped back, I noticed something that drained the blood from my face. There were 4 of us in the room, but in the mirror, there were 5. It wasn't clear, more like a shadow standing just behind Claire. I blinked, convinced it was a trick of the cracks in the glass, but the figure stayed. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. It was just there, watching. I didn't want to scare the others, but Claire must have seen it too, because she suddenly grabbed my arm and whispered, "Do you see it?" Her voice shook. Evan laughed again, but it was forced this time. "Yeah, real funny, guys. Who's hiding back there?" He swung his flashlight toward the space behind Claire. Empty. No one there. But in the mirror, the shadow still stood. Sarah muttered that she was done, and she started heading for the stairs. None of us argued. As we turned away, a loud crash echoed through the library. It sounded like a whole bookshelf collapsing. We bolted, scrambling over debris, climbing out through the basement window into the cold night air. We didn't stop running until we were half a block away. Out of breath, we stood under a streetlight, trying to laugh it off, trying to convince ourselves it was just our imagination. But when I looked back, I swore I saw movement in the broken window. Not a face exactly, but the glint of glass catching the light, like the mirror had been dragged closer. We never went back inside. The library was torn down 2 years later to make room for a parking lot. But sometimes, when I walk past that spot, I feel the same prickling at the back of my neck, like something is still watching from behind invisible glass. Story 4. The apartment that wouldn't stay empty. I've lived in the same apartment building in Portland for almost 15 years. It's not glamorous. A 6-story brick block from the 1940s, with narrow hallways and doors that creak louder than they should. But it's home. I'm a freelance translator, which means I spend most days alone with books and screens. Solitude doesn't bother me. Silence is useful when you make a living from words. When my upstairs neighbor, Mrs. Keene, passed away last winter, her apartment stayed locked for months. She had no children, no family that I ever heard of. The place sat empty, dark behind frosted glass windows, like a missing tooth in the building's grin. I was almost grateful. She had a habit of dropping things at odd hours, and her ceiling always groaned. After she was gone, the quiet was complete. At least, it was supposed to be. The first night I noticed something wrong, I was working late. My desk faces the window, which has a clear view of the building across the street. As I glanced up, I caught sight of a dim glow from above me. Apartment 5B, where Mrs. Keene had lived. A light was on, not just flickering, but steady, yellow, as if someone was moving around inside. I knew that couldn't be. The landlord had assured us all the locks were changed. No one had rented it yet. Still, I sat there, staring at the glow until it clicked off. My rational mind said faulty wiring, but faulty wiring doesn't usually wait until you're watching. The next night, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate pacing across the ceiling. Exactly the way I used to hear Mrs. Keene when she watered her plants, except this time she wasn't alive. I told myself I was overtired. I even laughed at the thought of calling the landlord to complain about footsteps from a vacant unit. But the laugh didn't last long, because I realized the sound stopped the moment I held my breath, as if whoever was up there had been listening to me. On the third night, the elevator stopped on 5 by itself. I wasn't in it. I just heard the machinery groan and the cables rattle as it moved. Nobody came down. Nobody went up. Just the hollow bell dinging for an empty ride. By then, I'd convinced myself that maybe someone had broken in. A squatter, maybe. That thought was oddly comforting. A real person, however unwelcome, made more sense than the alternative. So I went upstairs. The hallway smelled of dust and floor polish. Apartment 5B was dark, its door secured with a steel latch and a landlord's padlock. But as I leaned close, I swear I felt a draft, as though the apartment were breathing under the door. And then faintly I heard humming. A woman's voice, tuneless and low, almost lost in the air shaft. I left before I could hear more. Days passed. I tried to bury myself in work, but the disturbances kept multiplying. A soft thud at 2 a.m., like something heavy dropping upstairs. The faint trickle of water, though the pipes had been shut off. And once, this one froze me. The smell of lavender, Mrs. Keene's perfume, drifting down the stairwell. I wasn't sleeping well anymore. My dreams grew thin, stretched by the awareness of someone pacing, always pacing above me. I thought of calling the police. But what would I say? "Excuse me, officer, a dead woman is rearranging her furniture?" Then last Thursday, everything escalated. I woke to the sound of chairs scraping, real physical dragging of wood against wood. I couldn't stand it any longer. I grabbed my phone and a flashlight, climbed the stairwell, and stopped outside 5B. The padlock was gone. The door stood slightly open. Inside, the apartment looked nothing like I remembered. I'd seen it once before, when Mrs. Keene was alive. Lace curtains, potted ferns, shelves of porcelain cats. Now it was bare. But in the middle of the empty room, a single chair faced the window. And in that chair sat a woman, not Mrs. Keene. You know how sometimes you can't focus on a face, no matter how hard you try? That's what it was like. She sat perfectly still, her head tilted as though listening. My flashlight flickered once across her hands, resting in her lap. They looked pale, waxy, too still. She didn't move, but I felt her attention shift. Not her eyes, her attention. As if she knew every word in my chest, every beat of my heart. I ran. I don't even remember leaving the building. I only remember sitting in my car until sunrise, shaking so hard I couldn't fit the key into the ignition. Since that night, I can't bring myself to go near the 5th floor. But the noises haven't stopped. They've grown closer. Last night, I heard the chair scraping, not above me, but beside my own wall, as though 5B had stretched itself to meet me. And sometimes, when I look at my reflection in the dark window, I see her, that same woman, sitting just behind my shoulder, waiting for me to listen. I don't think the apartment upstairs is empty anymore. I think it's waiting. Story 5. The parking lot that shouldn't have been empty. I work as a night shift security guard at a small office park on the outskirts of Portland. The pay is decent, and honestly, the solitude isn't that bad. I'm not the type who minds being alone, but sometimes the silence can play tricks on you. Most of my job is just driving around in my old sedan, checking that the gates are locked, and that no one's sneaking in to mess with the buildings after hours. It's routine, boring work. Or at least, it used to be. A few weeks ago, I finished my rounds around 2:30 a.m. and realized I hadn't eaten since lunchtime. There's a little 24-hour diner about 15 minutes down the highway. The kind of place with faded neon signs and coffee that tastes like it's been sitting on the burner since the Reagan era. Still, at that hour, it was the only option. The lot was almost empty when I pulled in. Just one car parked crooked at the far end. An old silver sedan with its lights off. I thought nothing of it at first. People crash in their cars all the time at diners. But when I got out to head inside, I noticed something strange. The car was running, the faint hum of its engine barely audible over the buzzing neon sign. Inside, the diner was almost deserted, except for a tired-looking waitress and a trucker nursing a mug of coffee. I grabbed a booth by the window, ordered pancakes, and tried not to keep glancing at that silver sedan outside. Every time I did, it felt like someone inside was watching me. When I finished eating and stepped back out, the car was still there. The driver's seat was reclined all the way back, but I swear I could see the shape of someone sitting upright. As soon as I unlocked my car, the sedan's headlights flicked on. Though it didn't move, my stomach sank. I got in, pulled onto the road, and told myself it was just a coincidence. But when I merged back onto the highway, the sedan slid in behind me, matching every turn, every lane change. Now, I don't scare easily, but something about that car sticking to me at 3 a.m. felt wrong. Instead of going home, I took a detour through the industrial district, thinking I could shake them. They followed. No hesitation. I ended up pulling into the back lot of a warehouse I knew, one with plenty of floodlights and cameras. I figured if they were up to no good, they wouldn't want to be seen. For a moment, it worked. The sedan stayed at the edge of the lot, headlights glaring but unmoving. That's when my phone buzzed. It was my younger sister, Emily, who lived a couple miles away. She texted, "Are you parked outside my building? Thought I saw your car." My blood ran cold. I hadn't told her where I was. And more importantly, I wasn't anywhere near her apartment. I texted back quickly, telling her to lock her doors and not open them for anyone. I wanted to call, but before I could, movement caught my eye. The sedan's driver's door opened. A tall man stepped out, dressed in dark clothing. He didn't approach. He just stood there, staring across the lot at me. Then, without a word, the other 3 doors opened too. 3 more figures stepped out. They didn't move either, just stared. I couldn't breathe. 4 people, motionless under the buzzing lights, facing me like they were waiting for me to do something first. I slammed my car into reverse, then sped toward the exit. In my rearview mirror, I saw them piling back into the sedan. Headlights blazed, and within seconds, they were on my tail again. I didn't want to lead them to Emily's place or mine, so I headed for the state park by the river. That night, the park's gate is locked, but there's a gravel pull-off where locals sometimes fish. I carked, killed the lights, and ducked down in my seat. Minutes passed. My heart was hammering. Finally, I heard it. The crunch of tires on gravel. Headlights swept across the trees. They had followed me. I was frozen, gripping the steering wheel, praying they would keep driving. Instead, the sedan stopped directly behind me. The engine cut off. Silence. Then, in unison, all four doors opened again. I didn't wait to see what came next. I started my engine, floored it out of the lot, and didn't look back until I was halfway across town. The sedan was gone. By the time I got home, the adrenaline had worn off and left me shaking. I checked my phone. Emily had texted again. Never mind, wasn't you. But I swear, the same car suckled the building twice. Thought it was yours. I wanted to tell her everything, but I couldn't bring myself to. What would I even say? That a group of strangers had stalked me across the city for no reason, and then... what? Vanished? The next night, when I showed up for work, I saw it again. Same silver sedan, parked in the far corner of the lot, engine off this time. No one inside. I don't know what they want or why they keep showing up. But now, every time I drive past a parked car at night, I find myself staring into the dark windows, half expecting to see four shadowed faces staring back.